Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Daily Defender. So glad you guys are back with us. Glad we're back with you folks. Glad we get to spend some time again together and share a bit of information and knowledge. So really appreciate that. Of course, the usual information and thank you for all the new subscribers. We've had a really nice batch of new subscribers, so really appreciate that. We're creeping towards that 50% goal, so we're still behind in terms of how many subscribers we need. But again, thank you for all of the new subscribers. Welcome back to all of you who are subscribers, and thanks again for the great comments. We had another series of really nice comments. But today I wanted to talk about a really fun and interesting firearm, and as you can see, I couldn't stay away from Smith & Wesson revolvers very long here on the channel, and that's because this is one of my I don't want to say all-time favorites, but definitely one of my favorite Smith & Wesson revolvers that I own. This happens to be a Model 66. Specifically, it's a 66-2, and we'll talk more about that in the deep dive. And it is the classic combat Magnum, 357 Magnum, in a stainless steel frame or platform. And it's got some really nice, again, as most Smith & Wesson revolvers do, has some really nice history. This was extremely popular with state police and highway patrol units in the 70s and 80s, right when the revolvers were kind of king. More specifically in the 4-inch and 6-inch, and we'll talk a little bit about all these different variants and engineering versions in the deep dive. But and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. I just recently shot it, and just how much I like it, how enjoyable it is. So, without any further ado, let's get into our traditional deep dive on this Smith & Wesson 66-2 Combat Magnum. So as I just introduced in the intro, this is our Smith & Wesson Model 66, in this particular case, a 66-2 and 357 Magnum in a completely stainless steel platform. And there's a lot of great things to talk about this gun. We've got to, as usual, unpack a lot of stuff. But I think the very, very first thing I've got to talk about is just how pretty it is and just visually appealing it is. It's just an absolutely gorgeous firearm in its stainless steel configuration. I think, as many of you know, and I've made comments multiple times on this channel, I really am a sucker for the Smith & Wesson blued guns. Again, the vintage or legendary midnight blue. But there is something about this particular 66-2 that I think is just gorgeous and very purpose-built, very muscular. It's probably due to the smaller size. I think this happens to be a 2.5-inch barrel, and I think it's just the package makes it look very, very capable and muscular. And of course, this is a clear and safe firearm, so we have that to work with. And so, yeah, just a gorgeous gun in my opinion. And as I alluded to in the intro, very, very popular with state police and highway patrolmen. The Model 66, more likely in a 4-inch and 6-inch version, basically. And those were the three barrel lengths that were most prevalent: 2.5-inch, which is what we have here, 4-inch and 6-inch. There were some specialized runs of 3-inch, and I think, if I remember right, when the product line ended in the early 2000s, and that would have been around the Model 66-8, I think the 3-inch maybe was kind of the norm that Smith & Wesson was producing. But we'll kind of get into that. But yeah, very, very popular with highway patrolmen, state police, most likely for two reasons, right? First of all, the stainless steel construction, the lack of concern, or they don't need to be concerned about blued guns rusting and pitting and affected by the elements as much as the stainless steel guns. And then, of course, the 357 Magnum cartridge, which has historically been very, very popular with state police and highway patrolmen for a number of reasons. Certainly the legendary caliber of penetration, and I think warranted, through barriers such as glass and car doors and things like that. And then also these this kind of legendary, I don't want to say maybe mythical, or maybe both, legendary, mythical, stopping power of a 357 Magnum. I think we all realize that, stopping power or knockdown capability with a handgun is a bit of a misnomer, but certainly not to take anything away from the 357 Magnum cartridge. It's a very powerful round, very capable round, and has been very successful. So again, very popular within that state police highway patrolman, again, most likely in 4-inch or 6-inch barrels. But just getting back into this and its kind of historical side on the Smith & Wesson side, these would have been produced from about 1970 to about 2004, 2005. I've seen some different things on when the product line actually ended, or I should say the model line actually ended. And maybe in traditional Smith & Wesson form, maybe there's not really a clear end date. If they were still using leftover parts or had leftover parts and were trying to close out the model run, maybe technically the last production year was 2004, but maybe they were still producing guns early in 2005. So that's kind of its historical range, and of course that would make sense with the heyday of revolvers certainly kind of coming to an end there in the early 2000s and moving to semi-automatics. But so these ran from that particular year, 1970 to early 2000s, and there were the model ranges or variants went from a standard model 66 all the way to or I should say just to a 66-8. So that would have been the last evolution. This particular one is a 66-2, and of course that's noted right there on the inner part of the frame. So that's obvious and easy to pick up. And if I didn't state it already, as we've stated on this channel many times, Smith & Wesson went to model numbers in 1957. So prior to that, they would have just been referred to as the Combat Masterpiece, Combat Magnum, Chief Special, etc. Right? The model numbers being assigned to the firearms and stamped into the guns didn't start until 1957. So this being a 66-2 with a little research, most likely a 1980 firearm, right around there, maybe 1980, 1982, something like that. So this is an early 1980s version, and we'll talk a little bit more about that too. As we kind of get into the deep dive, but we can kind of just migrate into that, I guess, in terms of just talking about the pistols. So the 66 is a K-frame. So this is a K-frame platform that Smith & Wesson was using. As you probably most likely saw, it's a 6-shot 357 Magnum, but of course easily accepts 38. Cartridges as well, which is one of the beautiful things about 357 Magnum, and frankly one of the more enjoyable things I like about the platform. I really enjoy buying the 357 Magnum guns and having that capability if I want to shoot 357 Magnum that day, but really it's just such a pleasure to shoot 38 Special. If you're kind of new to revolvers, or getting back into them, I should say, I guess as most people are maybe, the 38 caliber in the 357 Magnum is just a real pleasure to shoot, especially in 4-inch and 6-inch barrels. And I'll talk a little bit about my experience about this one on the range. But so we've got a 6-shot K-frame. As you can see, it's an all stainless steel platform. This one is a 2.5-inch. I really love this 2.5-inch. I think it's still considered a snub nose, so I think we still put it in that category. The 2.5-inch, interestingly, were round butts, where the 4 and 6-inch were square butts. So that was a little bit different. And as we kind of do our walk around, we can get into some more of the, kind of more of the details. I guess a couple of the things I wanted to mention too before I get away from the models, again, from the model 66 all the way to a 66-8. They also had made this in a Ladysmith version. So that's always interesting. As we've talked about before on this channel too, Smith & Wesson carrying and working with the Ladysmith branding and marketing. They've used it since very, very early on, late 1800s, early 1900s, and continue to use it to this day, which I think is really cool. And there were also performance center versions of this as well, especially in the later evolution of it. I don't know if that was 66-8s or 66-7s, but I do know there were performance center versions of this as well. And the Ladysmith was introduced in the mid-90s. I almost forgot to mention that. So that was a 90s, you know, version, and probably was around for, you know, less than you know, 10 or 12 years, something like that. So back to our kind of deep dives. Let's just kind of walk around it, and I can keep talking about it. Again, just a gorgeous firearm in my opinion. And if we kind of just do our usual walk around, on this side, we've got Smith & Wesson stamped into the 2.5-inch barrel. And we also have a very large trademark stamp. And if I'm not mistaken, at some point, Smith & Wesson moved that to the right side, and a smaller trademark stamp, but I don't remember what model that started at. And again, this is a 66-2, early 1980s. It does not have a pinned barrel at this point. In fact, the 66-2 started its, you know, model year, or its model version, with the delete of the pin barrel. And you'll also note it does not have a recessed cylinder, so that was eliminated as well. It does still have the hammer nose, so we still have that. And we still have the forcing cone of the, and I don't know if I can get that into, yeah, you can kind of see the flat or squared off base of the forcing cone there. This was the historical, traditional manner that Smith & Wesson made these barrels on K-frames. And there's enough discussion over the years to probably warrant it to be accurate that these forcing cones did have some tendency, or could crack under just continuous 357 Magnum use. People have noted that or stated it, and then of course you have other folks that claim they've got their K-frames and have shot tons of 357 Magnum through it and never had an issue. When Smith & Wesson moved to their later versions and their classic series, they changed this design and moved to a beefier, almost full circle, if you will, forcing cone for the newer 357 Magnums. So that that would be one positive towards the newer 357 Magnums, that the design criteria has been changed, and supposedly that is a more durable, robust system. We still have the traditional cylinder, you know, lock up to the slide, or frame, I should say, and just kind of moving down through the frame, very traditional through here. I'll come back to the stocks in a minute. We already talked a little bit about the hammer. Still have a hammer nose, a fairly wide textured hammer here. Obviously not a recessed hammer or anything like that. The sights are very nice on this firearm, and kind of interesting, and I definitely wanted to spend a little time commenting about it. First of all, it has the orange inlay on this particular model, and I really like this. And I'm actually surprised that Smith & Wesson just didn't keep doing this, or didn't do this more often, more regularly with firearms, with their revolvers. Just a very nice manner of doing that. And then you have this adjustable rear sight, which is considerably, you know, better than just a simple trench sight along the top of the top of the frame. So very nice. Some models, including the Ladysmith, did have a white outline on this, and of course that would have been nice as well. But this is nice. This is a nice sight picture. My eyes pick this up well. Really like the red or orange, you know, inlet here on the front sight. And of course, it's a fixed front sight as well. Just kind of working our way around the right side here. Traditional. At this point, Smith & Wesson stamped information, made in the USA, etc., in the Springfield, Mass. And then up here on the right side of the barrel, we have the caliber stamp, Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum, which of course is always so cool. And so yeah, that's kind of our walk around on the firearm. The stocks. So the stocks that came on this particular firearm, and I actually had to kind of dig them out of the drawer, and I think I've got the right ones. These are kind of the K-frame round butt stocks that came with it. And honestly, to me, they were a little anemic, and if almost for the size, like it was a size small stock on a size large firearm. I know this is the correct stock, and that's just the way they were. And of course, that's why so many folks also added the grip adapters and such to try to get a better handle on that. I wanted to do something a little bit different with this one and went with an aftermarket kind of combat grip. This is just that. This is just an aftermarket stock that I put on here. I would probably give it an 8 out of 10. Its construction seems very well in terms of the stocks themselves. The wood grain is very nice. The texturing is very nice. You've got a little bit of a funky gap up here. It doesn't bother me. Obviously, if you were a traditionalist or were trying to have the gun in its original configuration, you'd have something like the Magna stocks on here from a correct time period, etc. But I'll tell you, for everything that these stocks are not, what they are is extremely comfortable and a great grip. Just a great purchase on there. So enjoyable to shoot this gun. And I love these. I love these stocks. It's, again, not traditional for the firearm in terms of its period correctness. This was a firearm that did not come with a box. It was just in a really, really good condition when I saw it, and I thought the price was very good. It was at this point it was under 3 figures. So, and I was just at a gun show this weekend, and all of these seem to be now in the $1,300 to $1,500 range. Granted, some with original boxes and maintenance kits, etc., which certainly add to the value. But this one was extremely solid, very well. The condition of it was in excellent shape. No real scratches or dings or anything like that. The side plate is in great shape. The trigger is phenomenal, and it just shoots amazing. I should say the backstrap does have the grooves, and I don't remember the number of grooves. Smith & Wesson does call that out in their macro description of the firearms. I don't remember what this one is. But this is just an extremely enjoyable firearm to shoot. The grip is excellent. I shot it this week, like I mentioned. I only shot 38 special through it, and it's just a treat. The 2.5-inch barrel does give you a little bit of flash, even with the 38, but so manageable. And once you get up onto it and grip onto this part of the frame, it is such an enjoyable gun to shoot. It points well. Your sight picture, everything just comes together. It's just a wonderful revolver. I just can't say it enough. And so if you're in the market for a 357 Magnum stainless steel, I mean, you've got a lot of options, right? This one might be one, in my opinion, that you'd want to put on your short list. It's again, for all the things I just said, the trigger, the way it looks, the feel, the balance. It's truly one of my favorite Smith & Wesson revolvers. And, I have to, admit, we know that, by the time it got to the 66-8, I don't think this model ever made it to the Classic series, but some of the now Classic series features, unfortunately, like the trigger lock and the mechanism on how the cylinder now locks up to the frame, which is different than this model. Yeah, and hammers well, all these different features that they've brought along. I think a lot of them are on that 66-8. And I'm still, and we've talked about it on this channel, I'm still generally a fan of buying the older Smith & Wessons over the new ones. And that does pain me to say. And again, having said that, I do have Classic Series Smith & Wesson revolvers, and I do like them, and I've had no problems with them. So I do have to balance that message. I'll read and hear things and talk to people, and there's can be some complaining about the newer versions and some of the quality control and some of the features and feel to a more current Smith & Wesson revolver. And so there's a balancing act, I think, there, where if you're looking for some of the design features, as we've talked about before on this channel, and some maybe just want a new firearm, then you're going to have to locate one of the newer versions of this, or look towards a new classic version of the Smith & Wesson firearms. But if you're willing to do some searching and can find some good shops and can hold some of these and find some of these, I'm a fan of the older Smith & Wessons and the way that they were building these. We've talked about it before on the channel, but we haven't done a revolver video in a while, so I'll mention it again. Basically, up until probably the 90s, late 90s, and when Smith & Wesson kind of moved more towards semi-automatic and the revolver started to take a turn, towards the back seat or the back burner, up until that point, the craftsmanship and the way that Smith & Wesson built revolvers was amazing. And effectively, the parts, because the way that they were made, had to be almost custom fitted to the gun, or semi-custom fitted to the gun. So they weren't using the MIM parts, these kind of mass-produced parts, which, again, by all accounts, seemed very good. But it's a bit more of a cookie-cutter assembly, as I understand it, opposed to going back into the 1900s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, where, because of the way they made the parts, the armorer or the gunsmith or the production person on the line basically had to hand fit the parts into the firearm, and then was checking the firearm, and then would come back and do any refinement to the firearm that needed to be made to those parts to make sure the gun worked as it was supposed to and worked flawlessly. And so you got a level of, I don't want to say handmade, but again, semi-custom, or a lot more attention to detail had to be done based on the way the parts were made back then. And you have this kind of added benefit to the way the firearm was made and feels, and the trigger and how it shoots. So again, we haven't done a Smith & Wesson revolver video in a while, so I thought I'd spend a little time telling you a little bit about my understanding on how Smith & Wesson built these firearms for the first 90 years or 100 years, or whatever you want to call it, before they just things naturally have to change. And there are some advantages to the MIM parts. Many of the MIM parts have been used very, very successfully in other firearms. So I'm really not trying to take away from that part of the discussion about it, specifically about an MIM part. But there's, like I said, this side benefit, or hidden benefit maybe, to how these firearms had to be built up through the 90s, and kind of this hand fitting. And so you get this very, very kind of almost unique benefit. So without beating a dead horse or spending an enormous amount of time on that, I did want to mention that. But so that's really the the 66-2, the Combat Magnum, that I wanted to talk about today. Again, my experience has been nothing but exceptional with it. Absolutely love it. Likes and dislikes, I like everything about it. I don't think I dislike anything. Small adaptations or small adjustments. It would have been nice to have the white outlined rear sight. But beyond that, I really can't find any fault in this firearm. So I hope you guys like that. I hope I got all the points covered that I wanted to cover on it. Smith & Wesson 66-2 in this particular case. Early 80s Combat Magnum, just a beautiful firearm. So thanks for tuning in with us, and we'll see you again very, very soon on the Daily Defender.